A fellow up in Scottsboro got a quote on his back deck last spring. $980. 3 days of work, and they'd sand it down to bare wood before they even started. He didn't have $900, so he mixed about $1.50's worth of two things out of the paint aisle, wiped it onto one board with an old cotton rag, and stood there, watching the gray come off the wood while he did it. Here's what it is. I'm not going to string you along for 6 minutes. Boiled linseed oil, thinned with turpentine. That's the whole thing. It's what every cabinet maker and every shipwright on Earth used before about 1950. And the reason it works is not the same reason paint works. Paint and polyurethane sit on top of the wood like a shell. That shell cracks eventually. It always cracks. And once it does, water runs underneath, and you're sanding the whole thing back to bare boards. Oil doesn't sit on top. It soaks into the grain and hardens in there. No shell to crack, which means you never strip it. You just wipe more on. That's the part where the word forever actually earns itself. I'll give you the mix, how to put it on, and a warning about the rags that I need you to hear all the way through, because this stuff has burned down a skyscraper and killed 3 people, and hardly anybody mentions it. I'm Otis, Northern Alabama. My granddaddy had a workbench where the top was so dark you couldn't tell what wood it was. I thought it was dirt. It was about 60 years of oil, wiped on with whatever rag was handy whenever it looked thirsty. That bench outlasted 2 houses. Nobody ever sanded it. Nobody ever stripped it. It just got wiped. In 1860, a British inventor named Frederick Walton left a can of linseed oil open in his London workshop overnight. In the morning, there was a rubbery skin across the top of it. That skin wasn't the oil drying the way water dries. The oil was pulling in oxygen out of the air and knitting itself into a solid. Walton spent the next 3 years working out how to control that, and what came out of it was linoleum. He named it after the Latin for flax and oil. But the oil was old long before Walton. It's pressed out of flaxseed, and people have grown flax about as long as they've grown anything. Rub it into timber and it soaks in and goes hard over a few weeks. That's the first wood finish there ever was. There are 2 kinds of wood finish in the world, and once you see the difference, you can't unsee it. Polyurethane, varnish, lacquer, most deck sealers. Those are film finishes. They cure into a layer sitting on the surface. New, they look wonderful, but wood moves. It swells in July and shrinks in January, every year. And that film on top doesn't move with it the same way, so it crazes, it lifts at the edges, and water gets in behind it. Now you've got water trapped under a waterproof layer. That's worse than no finish at all, and it's exactly why a peeling deck goes gray and soft underneath. Linseed oil is a penetrating finish. It goes down into the pores and hardens in among the fibers. The board swells and shrinks, and the oil goes with it, because it isn't a layer anymore. It's part of the wood. Nothing to peel, nothing to strip. That's the whole argument. 2 ingredients, boiled linseed oil, and the can has to actually say boiled. Raw will sit there sticky for weeks. Boiled has dryers in it and hardens in a day or 2. A quart runs about $5. Turpentine, the real kind, distilled from pine. Paint aisle. Mineral spirits will do if you can't find it. Mix them roughly half and half in a glass jar and shake. That's it. 2 things, and in a minute I'll tell you why I left out the 3rd one you'll see in every other version of this. Brush the surface off dry. Cobwebs, dirt, leaves. You don't need to sand, and don't pressure wash. You'll drive water into the boards, and then you're waiting a week for them to dry before you can oil anything. Dip a cotton rag and wipe it on along the grain, working about 2 foot at a time. Give it 15 minutes to soak in, then go back over it with a dry rag and wipe off whatever's still sitting wet on top. That step is not optional. Oil left standing stays tacky and collects dust. And this is where people decide the whole method doesn't work. Wait a day. Second coat the same way. Start with your worst board, the one in the sun that's gone silver. You'll watch the color come up under the rag as you go, and that one board tells you whether you want to do the other 40. Now the part I promised, and I want a full minute of your attention. Rags soaked in linseed oil can catch fire on their own. Nobody has to light them. Here's why. That oil hardens by reacting with air and the reaction gives off heat. Spread thin on a board, the heat goes nowhere. But wad a soaked rag up and drop it in a bucket, and the heat has no way out. It builds on itself, and it will keep building until the rag reaches its own ignition point and starts burning with nobody in the room. On the night of February 23, 1991, that happened on the 22nd floor of a 38-story office building in Philadelphia, 1 Meridian Plaza. Workers had been refinishing the woodwork and left the rags in a pile. The fire burned for 19 hours across 8 floors. 3 Philadelphia firefighters died in it. Captain David Holcomb, 52, firefighter Phyllis McAllister, 43, firefighter James Chappell, 29. So here's what you do. Every single time, take the rags outside, spread them flat on concrete, on a fence rail, over the edge of a can, anywhere air reaches both sides. Leave them till they're stiff as a board. Then they're safe. Or drop them straight into a bucket of water with a lid on it. What you do not do is leave them in a heap in the garage. Not for an hour. Let me be straight about the limits, because you'll see this sold as a miracle, and it isn't one. First, the version you'll find everywhere adds white vinegar as a third ingredient. I left it out on purpose. That 3-part recipe is genuinely old, but it was a furniture reviver for wiping down pieces that already had a finish on them. On bare weathered wood, you're adding water to an oil, which works against you. And on oak, vinegar plus the tannin in the wood, plus any trace of iron, gives you black stains that don't come back out. Second, this darkens wood. On light timber like maple or birch, it can go yellow over the years. On oak, walnut, cedar, redwood, and pine, it warms the grain and looks better with age. Third, forever means you never strip it. It does not mean you never touch it again. Outside in the sun, plan on a fresh coat once a year, 10 minutes on a chair, an afternoon on a deck. Fourth, turpentine is flammable, and the fumes will give you a headache in a closed room. Doors open. So why isn't this on the shelf with a brand name on it? It's simpler than a conspiracy, and I think the simple version is worse. You can't patent linseed oil. It's been pressed out of flax for thousands of years. You can't patent turpentine either. The Greeks were distilling it. And a thing nobody can own is a thing nobody has any reason to advertise. No company gets richer if you learn this. So nobody buys the ad, nobody sponsors the segment on the home improvement show, and it slides down the search results 1 year at a time until a whole generation has never heard of it. Meanwhile, the same oil chemistry goes into a branded bottle with a picture of a deck on it at 10 times the price. That deck in Scottsboro cost him about $4 in the end, and one Saturday. He gets a Saturday every year now, instead of a bill every 3. Go find the worst board you own. The gray one in the sun you've been avoiding all summer. Do that one board, then come tell me in the comments what it looked like after, because I already know.